Hey everybody, this is Sean with Tab Performance, and today I'm going to be installing our new Folsom prison bars on an Indian Challenger. So just a couple of quick things before I get into the install here. Bars are compatible with the Challenger and the Pursuit models, also compatible with 2018 and up Chieftains and Roadmasters, so it's one bar for both of those fairing designs. They're 1.5 inches in diameter, they're 36.5 inches wide, and they're available in a +4, +6, and +8 over grip height. While we're doing the install, we're also going to be installing the Avon air cushion grips. So I'll have a link for these down below, but the install is pretty straightforward, so we'll just get right into it. The first thing we're going to do is slide the tank back, and we'll pull the bars out from underneath the fairing, and that'll just give us the room we need to get the bars out without hitting the tank. So to get the tank slid back, we'll need to take off the side covers and the seat and our little tank bezel. Side covers just pop out, and the process is the same on both sides. Just lift up on the cover. That'll expose the bolt holding on the seat. Back both of those out on the left and right, and that is a 6mm Allen. Move on up to our tank trim. It's just one bolt. It'll be a 4mm Allen. For the tank, it's just 2 bolts at the back underneath the seat. Once we get those out, that should be it. We'll just be able to slide the tank back as far as we need to be able to get the bars out. 6mm Allen again. Not a bad idea to take a picture or a mental note of the order of the bolt, the washer, and the bushings, because if you get them pulled out, they're likely to separate, and it's just kind of hard to remember which order they go back into, so just be aware of that. Now we can just slide this back. And sliding the tank back will, one, like I said, allow us to get the bars out, but it will also just give us a little bit more access to our riser bolts, which we'll need to take out. All right, now we can disassemble our switch housings on both the clutch and brake side. Depending on the tools you have to work with, you may need to loosen up the clutch clamp first, just to be able to maneuver it out of the way of where these bolts are located. And I am gonna go ahead and loosen up our clutch clamp, but you don't wanna take it all the way off, because there's a switch, the clutch safety switch, that runs from inside the clutch housing into our switch housing, which will need to be disconnected before we take the clutch off. And those bolts are a 5mm Allen. And then there are 2 bolts holding the inner clamp together, same size, T20, just back both of those out. And then we can open up the inner clam, and then we can see the wires that are running through the bar to the switch housing. And here's the one, the clutch safety switch, that's running from the clutch lever to the housing. So we'll just need to de-pin that one or disconnect it before we take the clutch lever off. So to disconnect these, it's pretty simple. Just take something small and pointy, pick, and you're just gonna press on that tab, and then pressing on that will allow you to pull it out. There you go. One thing to note is you want to be careful just handling this piece, because this piece does tear fairly easily, and it's going to be about $400 to replace that part just by tearing that piece there, so keep that in mind. Now we can finish the clutch lever. Just kind of let that dangle out of our way. Then essentially the same process for the right-hand side. There's no switch or wire running from the switch housing to our brake lever, so we can just go ahead and take the brake lever completely off, and that'll give us room to get the screws out for our switch housing. And you'll want to plan as to where you're going to put the brake before you take it off, because you don't want to just let it dangle and let air run back through the lines. So what I'm going to do is just put our tank cover on the tank, and I'm going to rest it in a pocket on the tank. I can remove the switch housing. Once you get the two screws holding the inner clam together, then we can just open it up. Again, be careful. Slide our throttle off. And that'll give us access to unplug our wires from the switch harness. All right, now we're gonna remove the headlight. And we're gonna remove the headlight because once we get that out of there, we'll have access to our switch harness plug. First step we wanna do here is remove the headlight outer trim. And if you have something soft or plastic, that's a good idea. But if you don't, you can just use a screwdriver, just be careful. And we're just going to pry in between the trim and the fairing and pop this piece out right here. Now we can remove our headlight bracket. It'll be 4 Phillips heads. Just use what you can to get them out. Some of them are in kind of awkward spots. All right, so now we're looking through the front fairing through where the headlight was. You can see we have 2 white plugs. The one that we want to disconnect is the one that's further in the back. All you have to do is disconnect that. This part can be kind of a challenge. What I like to do is just unpin it from the bike. That'll give you a lot more room to work with, and then you can get it out and unplug it that way. Once you get here, you can do one of 2 things. You can actually just pull the wires through the bars, through the front of the headlight, and then take the bars off. Or you can just take the bars off with the wires already in them, and then just pull the wires out once you have the bars off. Since I have everything de-pinned already, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull the wires out while the bars are still on. And that might make it a little bit easier just to get the bars off without having to deal with any wires getting caught on anything while I'm pulling them off. Since I'm doing it this way, I actually have to disconnect the throttle first, and then I can pull the rest of it through. It's pretty simple to do. All you have to do is pull it out. You might need to feed the wires up, push on them a little bit through the headlight just to give yourself enough slack, but you're just gonna pull it out far enough to be able to expose that pin or that connection. And we're just gonna disconnect that. All right, now I can start pulling that through. I'm just gonna kind of push up here at the top, pull down here at the bottom. And then you can come on the inside of the fairing where the wires exit the bar and just pull right there, so that way you make sure you're not getting caught on anything. There you go. Okay, now we can remove the riser bolts and take the bars off. So the riser bolts, right here on the bottom side of that where I'm pointing my finger, so that's just a 19 millimeter hex head bolt. Okay, so we're gonna back those out. What I'm gonna use is just a long extension and a ratchet, and then I'll bring it down here, and then I'll back out that riser bolt from down below. All right, so hopefully you can see that, but I'm just gonna come in through the bottom here, find the bolt. It does help to have a universal joint. Same thing on the other side, and you want to be sure that you have a hand on the bar, just so that way when the bolt's out, it won't fall onto your tank. All right, so obviously I cheated a little bit there because I have an impact, but you don't need that. You can do the same thing just with, I'm using a normal ratchet instead of an impact. If you don't have enough extensions to reach the riser bolt through the bottom, what you can do is just pull the tank back a little bit further and then get in there with your wrench through the top, or again, ratchet. And then you'll just have to do quarter turn until they're all the way out. So work around if you don't have those, but it's still done without having to remove the tank completely or the front part of the fairing. All right, last few things with the stock bar. First, we're going to take off the grip on the left-hand side. The stock grip is going to be glued on there, so it might be a little bit to get that off, but just keep working it off. We're going to take that off so we can get to the stock handlebar grip weight. Basically, there's just a weight inside this part of the handlebar which helps reduce vibration. So we're going to take that out, put it in the new bar. Initially this might be kind of stuck, but you can see there's threads on the inside of it. So what you can do is find a screw if you're having troubles, is find a screw or bolt that matches that thread pitch, thread it in there, and then you can pull it out with a pair of pliers. You might be able to take a screwdriver and wedge it in there and pry it out, or you might be able to just twist it with your fingers and then pull it out. So hold on to that. Last, we're going to remove the handlebar clamp. It's 4 bolts, 2 on top, 2 on bottom, and you do want to make sure you keep track of the orientation of the clamp and the risers on the bottom. So we're going to back all of those out. It's a 6 millimeter Allen. All right, and just so I don't forget, I'm just gonna take this off. Might need to pry it or hit it with a mallet or something. I'm gonna take this off and put it back in the orientation that it would go in when it's mounted, just so I don't mix that up, because you can see how the risers are angled, and it will fit both ways, but one way is just a little bit more awkward than the other. So you want to make sure you get those back in the right way. I'm just going to leave that here for now. Now I'm going to take the tab performance bar and we can get the wires going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a string, blast the string through the bars with some compressed air. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the string to actually pull the supplied braided sleeve through. So I'm going to tape the sleeve to the string, just so that way the sleeve is able to protect the wires and the switch connections as we're pulling them through. Pull that through. Move the tape. Now we can get going on our wires. So the wires are specific to the left and right hand side. So the right hand side is going to have the extra connection for the twist grip sensor. Get these in here and try to get them separated a little bit just so they're not stacked on top of each other. So you're not making this bigger than it needs to be. Now I'm going to tape this quick just to verify it doesn't pull off. This does kind of act like a Chinese finger trap, so as you pull it through and it gets tight, it should cinch on that tighter, but I'm going to tape it just to be sure. Now that we have those pulled through, what we'll do is we'll pull out some slack and then push our twist grip sensor connection through the end of the bar so that way we can get our throttle connected. Just pull through some slack. Connect our twist grip sensor. You can pull back through to take out the extra slack. Now we can do a similar process for the left. If you don't have compressed air, you can do what I showed in the Harley handlebar install. You can tie something like a nut or something to that string and just let the weight of the nut pull the string through as you kind of maneuver the bar around, so it basically gravity will do all the work and pull the string through. Okay, now we can get our clamp put back on. We're gonna just go ahead and get this fully tightened down before you get it on the bike, just so we can tighten down our bolts a lot more easily. So what we're gonna do, just start with the top part of our clamp, get that put on. And what we're doing is centering the clamp with the cutout that we have for the wires. And then to start, we're just gonna get the clamp flush with the top section of the slot. And you wanna make sure you're centered with the clamp and the slot. We're flush there, and then what we're gonna do is just rotate it forward just slightly. And then we have just a little bit of overhang there. See if we can get a close up of that. And that's where you'll want it. So that way when we put it on the bike, we'll just have to put in the riser bolts, and the bars will already be where they need to be. There won't be any adjustments that need to be made. Then we can get our risers started. Those loosely in there, we're just gonna get those evenly snugged down. And then we're gonna get these torqued down to 18 foot-pounds. Last step before we can get the bars installed, we're gonna reinstall our handlebar weight. What we're gonna do is actually remove the stock O-rings. And the reason for that is our bar is just a little bit thicker than the stock bar. So the O-rings on the stock grip are just a little bit too big. So we're gonna remove those and put the supplied O-rings on. insert that, just like that. Now we can feed our wires over the triple tree down into the front fairing, back towards our headlight. And then we'll just kind of dip the handlebars in, making sure we clear our dash and our tank. Water, just like we took them out, I'm going to feed the bolt through the bottom. And it might be kind of tricky to do by yourself, but it is doable. Just feed through the bottom and kind of look through the top here. Get the other one started. Now I'm going to get those tightened down. Now we'll get those torqued to the 60 foot-pound torque spec. All right, if you pull the tank back further, you'll be able to get in there more easily with a torque wrench to get that. If you go through the bottom like I did, you might have to use, again, an extension with a universal joint, which I know you lose some torque through doing that, but since we're on the high end of the torque spec, I'm gonna go ahead and call that good. Now we can get our clutch loosely installed. Again, just loose for now because we're going to come back and adjust that once we get the switches on. We'll get the switches going here. There is an alignment dowel inside the clamp that will line up with the hole inside of the bar. Before we clamp that together, we do want to get these reconnected. So on this left-hand side, we have the one for all the switches in the switch housing, and then we have the clutch safety switch, and then this one is for a heated grip switch we don't have, so that one's not going to be used. Get this one plugged in first. And the housings for our plugs are specific to the plug that goes in it, so you can't put this one in the wrong one. So if you can't remember which one it was in, just try them out. If it goes in, it's the right one. If not, just put in the other one. Now we can get our dowel lined up with the hole in the bar. Might have to press the dowel in there just a little bit. Okay, now we can get our inner clamp screws. If you don't remember which screws go on the inside or where those go, just take the back of the switch housing and look at where the outside ones go, because the outside ones will go in those spots. So you just have to put the inside ones in the opposite spots of the holes on the outside. Now, the excess wire here does have to be clamped inside the outer switch housing shell. So what we're going to do is just pull the wires further through the bar just to take up some of that slack, so we can more easily put the outer shell on. All right, take our outer shell. And then we can put on our bolts. Then we can reinstall our grips. Again, you can reuse the stock one if you want. It's probably gonna get a little bit destroyed when you get it off initially, but you can reuse it. So you have to just slide that on. And then how these stay on there, you don't need glue or anything. There's just 3 little set screws that you can tighten down once you get the grip in place. I'm gonna leave that loose for now until we do our final adjustment. All right, now we can move on to the right-hand side. Process is nearly identical. We're just gonna start with our switches, get those plugged in. And like I mentioned before, this plug only goes into one of these, so you don't need to worry about putting it in the wrong one, because if you get the wrong one, it won't go in all the way. Like there, I'm bottoming out on the pin. But there, it just goes right back in. All right, now we can get our throttle on. The inner clamps around the throttle, so I want to get that on first. Just line up the slots on the twist grip sensor here with slots on the inside of the grip. Then we'll need to clamp around the grip and then align that plastic dowel with the hole in the bar. Just make sure you're not pinching any wires on the back side. The clamp won't close fully if you're pinching some wires back there, so just route them out of the way. We can start our screws. And one thing I'll point out real quickly that you won't be able to see while I was filming from the angle I was at is for the heated grip, there is a little slot basically on the back side of our inner shell that can just sit in right there, and that's the same on both sides. Now we can get our outer shell on. Now we can get our brake on. If you need a little bit more slack, all you have to do is pull on the brake line through the little brake line bracket. There's plenty of slack down there, so you just have to give it a little pull to get what you need. Just leave that semi-loose for now so we can do our final adjustment where we want our levers here at the end. All right, so here's our switch wire connection that I have pulled through. I'm just gonna reconnect it there, and then we'll get our headlight back in. And you can't see from here, but there is a little hole where we can repin this. I'm just gonna get that lined up and put it back in place. Now we can get our headlight and headlight trim bracket put back in. So take note that that orientation, it can be kind of tricky to get it exactly lined up. Now we'll get our tank slid back forward. Now we can get our tank trim put back on. There is a little alignment pin that will line up with the plastic groove in the tank. All right, now we can get our seat back on. We're just gonna line up the forks, the holes in the seat, and then the bolt with the groove in the back. Then we can do our side covers. Last step, I'm gonna adjust the brake and clutch lever where it's comfortable for me. And there we go, we are done.